We usually focus on safety of the aircraft, but I'm curious, what's actually done here in this country to ensure that pilots are both safe and this is key, sane?
Well, I'm not sure that we do much by way of insanity checking. The fact of the matter is, of course, that everybody that flies commercially in the United States is carefully vetted, but that vetting is simply you go through a person's background. Typically, these people that fly for the airlines have come through, if not from the military academies, at least from the military itself. Have a long and well-known history. They've been flying commercial aircraft in most cases for many years. So the fact that if in turn this thing turns out to be a consequence of some deliberate act of the people in the cockpit, it would be, I think, a very surprising development.
Again, Bob, you said you think it would be surprising if the pilots acted deliberately. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, I think it. Of course, anything's possible, but just once again, based on what you read in the press, they didn't make any particular effort to fly together. And the concept, right, the notion that there would be collaboration between the two of them to somehow steal the airplane, right, which is what's being suggested, well, is a pretty far reach in my mind.
Bob Crandall with us, of course, with his experience with American Airlines. Richard Falkenrath with us as well, working in so many areas of our national security. With the quiet of the weekend, with the clumsiness of the investigation, the silence that's out there now, what is our quality of satellite reconnaissance? When we say X number of nations will have satellite data, what exactly does that mean?
For the United States, the quality of satellites is excellent if we task the satellites to look at a particular area. That's the key thing. They can need to be reprioritized, and that can be done. The U.S. government does it all the time when it goes to war. So my expectation is that many of these satellites, which are normally watching global hotspots, are now looking at these airspaces. What
is the distinction of depth of ocean? Can a satellite, like in the water and where it's shallow, see something, but then in the Indian Ocean it's much more problematic?
Well, it'd have to be quite shallow and in good, strong sunlight. If it was something deep, like we're talking about in the Indian Ocean, no way.
Right.
Bob, I'm curious, you seem to be saying that the pilots probably didn't have a role in it. However, when you hear things like the plane went up to 45,000 feet, then went down again, and then up again, I mean, what's the only reason why that would happen?
We talked a week ago, and I said at the time, and I'd say again now, that one of the things that the experienced aviation people know is that it's a whole lot better not to speculate. That when we finally find the answer to aviation dilemmas of this kind, we almost always find that there are things we had absolutely no anticipation or expectation of. So the fact of the matter is, I don't know what's happened here, and nobody else knows, and we're not going to know until we find the airplane or the remains of the airplane.
Bob, that's a great point, trying to avoid speculation. Richard Falkenrath, you advised the White House on security issues for a number of years. Speculation aside, what happens now?
Well, the investigation is now there's a physical search that's expanding. Australia's in the lead, and the investigation is really looking at the human dimension. And on the human dimension, of course, we want to get to the bottom of this particular investigation, but there's a larger question, which is, was this a one-off or part of some larger conspiracy? And when you're in the intelligence business and counterterrorism, if it's part of a larger conspiracy, if the individuals were not acting alone and they had a support network, that's what you're really worried about.
David Kirkpatrick with us as well. David, you've got a point here.
Well, I was going to say, I think there's an even bigger point, which is that our modern aircraft don't use technology that is modern enough. There are a lot of systems that could be used routinely in international and domestic aviation that many of us actually use in our smartphones. Right. Many simple systems. Certain GPS systems that are routine are not currently allowed or utilized in the air traffic control system and in airplanes. A lot of pilots who are techies in the last few weeks have been posting and writing blogs, etc., saying they're shocked at how primitive the technology is on modern aircraft.
Yes, I mean, particularly real-time telemetry telemetry uplink to satellites is not done that could be done. It's expensive. But one of the measures we did post 9/11 was very low tech, and I'm afraid it had unintended consequences.
What is that?
Hardening of cockpit doors. So the FAA, I was in the White House when we did this, the FAA mandated hardened cockpit doors for all U.S. aircraft in 2003. It's now become a global standard. That may have had an unintended consequence of allowing one pilot to lock the other one out.
Bob Crandall remembers when it was a curtain. Come on, Bob. It was a curtain between the pilots. You know, you and the Wright brothers, they didn't even have a curtain. Do you like the cockpit doors today?
Do I like the cockpit door story? The fact is, I think that hardened cockpit doors were a very good idea. And when they are used, as they are used routinely and certainly by the U.S. carriers, I think they add a real sense of security. The cockpit is very difficult to get into. Now, all of this speculation again that that somehow or the other one pilot locked the other pilot out of the cockpit. Once again, I think all of those who are speculating are doing themselves and the rest of us a disservice. Let's wait till we find out what happened.
Well, talking about wrapping it up here, Richard, in terms of speculation, I'm curious as to what we don't know. I mean, what are authorities not talking about right now?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. In fact, we know KNOW very little. And I think Bob is exactly right here. You have to be careful about the facts. The number of facts that are out here is far fewer than the volume of speculation that's going on. We don't know the background investigation of these individuals. By now, every single person on that plane will have had all of their electronic communications analyzed by the U.S. intelligence service. We don't know who they were communicating with yet. That hasn't come out. We don't know where they've traveled to, any links to any criminal or terrorist organizations. None of that is known.
Hey, Bob Crandall, before we let you go, and again, thank you for joining us. You ran American for many years, 20 years, nearly 20 years. The question that Richard just raised about various types of telemetry, other uplinks to satellites that aren't being used, maybe that's a cost issue. Is it time for airlines to examine that cost issue and be willing to take down margins in order to make sure that everying is done to ensure the security of aircraft?
I think there are 2 points here. Number one, airlines are not going to take down margins. Airlines are simply going to pass the cost along to customers, as they should. And secondly, it's time for both the airline industry and governments to take a very careful look at why we don't equip our airplanes properly. I would call to everybody's attention. We are using in the United States an outmoded air traffic control system. Should have been replaced 10 years ago, and we are still struggling with how to finance it.